Okay, we begin the Gemara on Daf Kuf Samech Tes Samud Beis, 4 lines up from the bottom of the Yamud where it says Tanu Rabbanan. This is connected to something we learned before over here. Okay, we'll see the Braisa and then we'll see the connection to what we learned before. So the Gemara Tanu Rabbanan, we learned in the Braisa as follows: Haba lidain b'shtar u'b'chazake. A person that's occupying a property, and someone comes and challenges his ownership and says that this belongs to me. I never sold this property to you. What are you doing here? So the one that's in the property says, I can prove it's mine. And he actually has two proofs. He has a shtar, he has a document that he bought the property, and he also has a chazaka to prove this. When it comes to a property, after 3 years of a person being in a property, you can just base your status of ownership on the fact that I was here 3 years and nobody protested against this. This is what's called cheskas gimel shonim. We learned about this earlier in the Masechta. Squatters' rights? Nah, it's a different thing. Let's not mix the two different things. Okay, so yeah, a person's there 3 years, he doesn't need a shtar anymore. So then he can just say, look, I was here 3 years and therefore this is mine. So this person has both of these proofs. Says the Gemara, or the Braisa, Nidim b'shtar divrei Rebbe. So Rebbe says that he can just bring the proof of the document and he doesn't have to now bring witnesses or proof that he was there for 3 years. That he brings just a shtar. Rav Shlomo Gamliel says b'chazaka. Rav Shlomo Gamliel says that his proof is the chazaka, that he was there 3 years and he doesn't need a shtar. So who's the one that's more lenient here? Okay, we'll see that the Gemara is going to have many different ways how to understand this argument here. Okay, so we'll see. But again, Rabbi simply says that he has a shtar, so he presents the shtar. And Rav Shlomo Gamliel says that he has cheskas gimel shonim. He was there 3 years and that's proof that he's the owner and he doesn't need any shtar. Says the Gemara b'maika miflagi. What are they arguing about? It's a very interesting thing. He has two different proofs. So what's the difference if he's using this proof or he's using the other proof? Kiyas Rav Dimi. So when Rav Dimi came and he explained this brayso, so Amar, he said, "Ba'oisius niknais b'mesire kamiflagi." They're arguing about letters in a shtar, whether you can acquire a property just by giving over that shtar to somebody. And this is something that was brought up here before in the Gemara. In other words, what we're talking about over here is this person doesn't have a regular shtar. A regular shtar is you got this shtar from the seller that he sold the property to you. And it says in it that Reuven, the seller, sells a property to Shimon. That's not the kind of shtar this person has. Rather, what we're talking about over here is the shtar that you got from someone else that bought this property. This person that bought the property had the shtar, the deed of this property, and now what that person did is, he gave you that shtar as is. He didn't make a new kinyan and didn't write up a new shtar to sell you the property. He took that deed and gave it into your hands. Do you acquire a property just by the fact that a person that owns the property and has that deed gives you that shtar in your hands? Or does he have to write up a new shtar saying that now I'm writing up a new shtar and I'm selling you this property? So Oisius Niknas b'Mesira means if when I give you a shtar that has the words with the information about the original sale that this person that's holding on to it now has, if he just gives it over to someone else just by handing over the deed, does that create the acquisition of the property? That's the kind of shtar that this person is holding on to. So Rav Shlomo Gamliel holds Ein Oisius Niknas b'Mesira, that if all this person has is not a regular shtar, a shtar that someone else gave him, that deed of the property that was given over to him, that cannot be used as a proof that he bought it. It's actually not even a proper kinyan. So it was never, the kinyan was never properly done. So that doesn't prove anything. That's what Rav Shlomo Gamliel holds. Okay, so now based on...
It doesn't prove it says either.
Yeah, correct. It doesn't prove that it says. Correct. He never made a proper kinyan here at all. So according to this pshat, when Rav Shlomo Gamliel says that he has cheskas gimel shanim, he was there for 3 years, how would that actually prove it's his? If he never really made a proper kinyan, because the shtar that he has was a mistake. It was not really a kinyan. So then how would the fact that he was there for 3 years help him either? You can't just be there for 3 years. No, by a chazaka, if a person is in a property, you said before squatters' rights. What's if a person is in a property for 3 years and we ask the person, what are you doing here? What do you mean I've been here for 3 years? Squatters' rights. Doesn't work that way. If you're there for 3 years, you have to have a proper taina how you bought it. But in this case, Rav Shlomo Gamliel is saying that the whole kinyan was a mistake. So then how does this cheskas gimel shanim help? So the Rashbam here says, and the Rishonim explained that according to this pshat, when it says chazaka, it doesn't mean the fact that it was there for 3 years. It means that he made a proper chazaka, which is one of the ways you acquire a property properly. Chazaka is also, besides chazaka, which is the length of time that you were there as a proof that it's yours, chazaka is also that when you enter into a property and you make a chazaka, which means you put up a new door, a new fence, or you improve something in the property, that itself is a kinyan. We learned this earlier in the Masechta. So Rav Shimon Gamliel is basically saying that he brings eidim that I made a proper kinyan when I came into the property. That's the only proof that he'll have is his, but he can't use this shtar, which is not a regular kind of shtar. Rebbe Savar, however, Rebbe's opinion is oisius niknis b'mesira, that if you have a shtar that you got from someone else that bought his property and he just gave you over that shtar, so then just by giving you over that shtar, you can acquire. You don't need to make any additional kinyan. So therefore you can just present the shtar. So Rebbe is being more lenient. Rebbe is saying you just have to show that shtar and it's enough proof and it's a proper kinyan.
But you don't know the source of that shtar. That means that what you received from that person was a shtar. You don't know if that person got that.
Well, we look at the shtar itself. We look at the shtar. The shtar has witnesses. The shtar has 2 witnesses that are signed in it. It's a kosher shtar, and it's a good shtar. So, but the only problem is the shtar was someone else's and he just gave it over to you. So the question is whether that affects a kinyan. So Rebbe says that when someone owns a property and he gives you over that written shtar with the witnesses, that just giving over the shtar, you acquire. It creates a kinyan. So therefore you can just take out that shtar that was written for someone else and use it to show that you acquire this property.
But according to Rebbe, let's say that's true what you just now said, but it still doesn't say that it's his.
Why not? It's in his hands. It's in his hands.
He stole it.
No,
was worried yesterday about two stores.
Okay, so we're not chayshish that he stole it. He has eidim that it was given over to him. That's not the chashashe. He has eidim that the shtar was given over to him. The question is whether it's a good kinyan, because he just got he got someone. No, but if oisius are not niknes b'mesira, what it means is if you want to acquire karka, you need to write up a new shtar that you're selling this person the karka. You can't just give him over that deed into his hands. You have to write up a new shtar. Rebbe says you can just give over that original deed into this person's hands, and that itself affects a kinyan. So therefore you can take out that shtar.
The argument really is if only chazaka is kind or not.
Regarding if chazaka is kind or not?
Only chazaka is kind, because this person has 2 things.
Right. Okay.
So if whoever says that the shtar is the one that will prove that's his, he holds that chazaka.
Is not going to be.
The land is not going to be kind.
It depends which chazaka you're talking about. So that's why we can't.
Chazaka is the karka.
There's 2 different concepts of chazaka. There's the chazaka of being there for 3 years, and there's the chazaka of
improvement in the karka.
So that everybody holds this kind of. There's no machlokes about that. Even according to Rebbe, if you're going to bring eidim that you made a chazaka, it's going to work. Rebbe's saying you don't need that. What Rebbe's saying is just the shtar alone would be enough. You don't need the chazaka. But everybody agrees that the chazaka would work. If you have eidim,
he had 2.
He has both of these proofs. He comes into Bezdin and tells us, I have a chazaka and I have a shtar. The question is, which one does he have to now actually prove that he has? So Rebbe says that it's enough that it'll bring in the deed, the shtar into the Bezdin. He doesn't have to bring eidim that he made a chazaka. But regarding chazaka, everybody agrees that if a person comes and improves the karka, that's a valid kinyan. Okay, so Amalei Abaye says on this pshat that Rav Dimi said, Im kain, if this is the pshat here, then plukte lidamar. You're arguing on what Rabbi said. This goes back to a brayse that the Gemara brought before, where there the brayse clearly brought also a machlokes between Rab Shimon and Gamliel and the Chachamim regarding such a kind of case, where a person has a shtar of a gift, and now he wants to give that shtar back to the seller, or to the one that gave it to him. What happens when you got a shtar from a seller, and you just return the shtar to him? By returning the shtar to him, does the sale go back? Does the seller acquire it back just by giving him back the shtar? Rab Shimon Gamliel says it does, just by giving it back to him. So Rab over there explained that the reason is because Rab Shimon Gamliel holds that just by giving over the deed, it affects a kinyan, which is the exact opposite of the way Rav Dimi explained this brayse. Here Rav Dimi explains that according to Rab Shimon Gamliel, you can't prove it by this kind of document. You're going to have to prove it by chazaka, because Rab Shimon Gamliel holds that you cannot prove it just by giving, or you cannot buy a property, that is, just by getting the deed into your hands. So it's the pshat that you're saying here for Rav Shimon Gamliel is arguing on the pshat that Rabbi said earlier in a previous brayse. Amalei, so Rav Dimi said to him, to Abaye, so v'tiflei, Okay, so I'm arguing on Rabbi's pshat. So but Abaye pressed on further and said, this is what I was trying to say to you. Masnite loy mitarza elike de mitarza mar. The previous brisa that was quoted earlier on Daf Kuf Samach Tes, where there Rab Shimon Gamliel holds that you could acquire just by handing over a deed. That pshat that Rabbi said, there's no other way to explain what Rab Shimon Gamliel said there. So if so, it comes out v'imken kashid Rab Shimon Gamliel. So we have a contradiction now in Rab Shimon Gamliel's opinion. Before Rab Shimon Gamliel said handing over a deed affects a kinyan, and now you're explaining that according to Rab Shimon Gamliel, handing over a deed does not affect the kinyan, and therefore you must bring edim that you made a chazaka, that you improved the property. So this cannot be pshat in this brayse here. So Abaye explains another pshat here. The case here is there's something else faulty about this shtar that this brayse is talking about, and that is kagoyin shenimsa echad mem karev a pasul. This shtar has witnesses, and one of the witnesses signed in the shtar turns out to be a relative or someone that's pasul for edus, so it doesn't have proper witnesses signed in the shtar. So what? So now, if that's the case, why? So definitely the shtar is not good. But the Gemara says no. Beplukte the Rab Meir v'Rab Elazar kamiflagi. The argument here between Rebbe and Rab Shimon Gamliel is the same argument between Rab Meir and Rab Elazar. What's their argument? Rebbe savek like Rab Elazar. Rebbe's opinion is like Rab Elazar. The Omar Rab Elazar says Eidei Mesire Karti. Just like when it is by a get. So when you have a get, what makes this document, the get, into a kosher get? Not the witnesses that sign it. You don't even need those witnesses to sign the get. According to Rabbi Lazar. What witnesses do you need? Witnesses that see the husband handing over the get to the wife. The Eidei Mesire, when you hand it over. Those are the witnesses that make the get a kosher get. The witnesses signed on it, that's not needed. Minat Torah. So therefore here in this case as well, even though this is a document that the witnesses signed in it are pasul, you can still use the shtar. Because as long as you bring witnesses that this shtar was handed over to you, the shtar is a kosher shtar. So therefore, Rebbe says the shtar is enough. Rab Shimon Gamliel solve a law, Rab Meir. However, Rab Shimon Gamliel holds like Rab Meir. The Oma Eidei Chasima Karti. What makes a shtar a kosher shtar? By a get, and the same by a shtar being used for a sale. You have to have the witness to sign. And since in this case the witnesses that sign are pasul edus, whether because it's a relative or someone that's pasul, so therefore that's why he said that Rab Shimon Gamliel says this is not a shtar that can be used. So you're going to have to bring a chazaka, edim, that you made a chazaka in the property.
So he received an improper.
Correct. The document was it's a faulty shtar, a pasul shtar, so you can't use that. Now the Gemara asks on this pshat though, how could you say that this is what they're arguing about? But for Ha'omar Rabbe, didn't Rab Abba say, Moide, Hoya Rab Elazar, even though Rab Elazar says you don't need any signatures in a get, or the same in any shtar, you don't need them. But he would agree, if there's a forgery in the document, which means there's a problem in the signatures that are signed here in this document, because you have pasul edim signed, then even Rabbi Elazar would agree that it's pasul. And the reason is because this is a gzeira of Chazal, that if you're going to allow to have pasul witnesses in the shtar, people might come to think actually that these edim are kosher. So we don't want you to have pasul edis in the shtar. So you can't say that in this case, according to Rabbi Elazar, even with pasul edis in the shtar, it's still kosher. Rabbi Elazar agrees that in such a case, with pasul edis in the shtar, it's going to be pasul. So Elam Rabavine, or this is really Ravina. Ravina, usually in Gemara, he's quoted as Ravina. His real name is Rabbi Avina. So the Gemara says, Elam Rabavine, Hakol Maidim. Everybody agrees, Shem Kosov by, if this is a shtar that actually has edim that are not kosher, and therefore it's even written in the shtar, Huskaknu le'edusam shel edim, that the Bezin says we went to investigate the matter regarding these edim, v'nimtzas edusam is yefes, and we saw that this edus is the testimony is a forgery, which means it means that they're not kosher edim. Even if so in a case where it's clear that the edim signed in it are not kosher, shu pasul. There, everybody would agree that it's pasul. K'derababa, as we just quoted from Rababa. But how can we explain here the machlekes of Rabbi and Rab Shimon Gamliel, similar to what we just said before? What they're arguing about over here is a shtar that has no edim that are signed in it at all. What do you have though? So if you have no edim, so then what value does the information of the shtar have? But what you do have is edim that saw the mesira, that can come and testify that the seller gave over this document to the buyer. Eidei Mesira. You don't have Eidei Chasima that signed it, but you have Eidei Mesira. So here's the machlekes. The Rebbe saw, as we explained before, Rebbe holds law, like according to Rabbi Loza that says, just like by a get, what severs, what gives the koyach of this document to be, have the koyach to create a divorce. It's the Edom that were there when it was given over from the husband to wife. And therefore here as well, you can bring Edom Mesira and use this document. Abshum Gamliel holds like Rab Meir. The Omar Edech Simvikarti. You have to have signatures in the get itself, and in this case you don't, or the star. In this case you don't have any signatures, so you can't use the star. Even if you bring Edom Mesira, the star is not a good star without actual witnesses signed in it, and therefore you're going to have to bring a chazakeh, which refers to the Maisa Kinyan of chazakeh, to prove that you made a proper Kinyan.
Both Edom are kosher.
Both?
Both Edom are kosher?
Yeah. The Edom Mesira are kosher Edom, correct. Or now the Gemara offers a different shot. What we're talking about over here is so this is based on, we learned this already a few times here before. The Gemara says, this is a klal all the time, anytime you want to use any document to collect money or to prove that you bought something, you have to verify the signatures. Without that, the document cannot be used. What happens over here in a case where you didn't bring any proper verification for these witnesses, but the seller admits, I wrote the shtar. Or in another case, let's say in a case of a lender and a borrower, the borrower admits, true, I wrote the shtar, or we wrote the shtar, I borrowed the money. So now, are you going to need any additional verification if he, the person himself, the seller himself, admits already that he wrote the shtar? So seemingly there's no reason to have any additional verification. But the thing is though, what happens if the seller comes and says, I wrote the shtar, but I never gave it to you. I wrote it because there was maybe a plan for me to sell this property to you, but I never actually sold it to you, so I never actually gave you the shtar. So on one hand he's admitting, but immediately he's sort of taking it back by saying, but I never gave it to you. This is what's called pesha osar, hu pesha hitter. I'm the one that said that this shtar here is all authentic, but he immediately qualifies and says, but the sale never happened because I never gave it to you. So what's going to happen in such a case? That's what they're arguing about over here. So again, let's see in the words of the Gemara. What happens if the seller himself, he's admitting that the shtar was written? But now the question is, are you going to have to bring a kiyum, edim, to verify the authenticity of the shtar in order to prevent from the seller to say that I wrote it but I never gave it to you? So the Gemara explains, that's what they're arguing about. The Rebbe's opinion is, once the seller admits that he wrote this shtar, there's no need to have any additional edim to verify the document. Because Rebbe holds that this point that I just said before, pesha asar, pesha hitter, actually does not work in this case. Because really, minat Torah, such a document is kosher without any verification. It's a shtar is like two edim, and therefore you can't come and say about the shtar, which is now in the hands of the buyer, oh, I never gave it to him. The shtar is valid, independent of you. Even if the seller was not made, really minat Torah, the shtar is independently kosher. So therefore, the seller does not have any ability and right to come and say any claims about this shtar, to come and be mevatlet. It's a kosher shtar. Even though Chachamim required that you should be machshir, and now he can come and say, you're relying on me to say that it's kosher? So if you're relying on me, so then you have to listen to everything that I say. I say that it was written, but I also say that I never gave it to him. But Rebbe says it doesn't work that way, because since minat Torah, the shtar is be'emes kosher without what he says, so we ignore whatever he says. This is a kosher shtar that's in the hands of the buyer now, so therefore the shtar is kosher. You don't need any additional kiyum here. That's Rebbe's opinion. Rav Shem Gamliel argues and says, no, tzarich l'kaimai, that if you don't have a proper verification for the shtar, if the source of the verification comes from the seller himself, so then the seller has the power of pesha also or pesha hitter. That means he can come and say, you're relying on me to verify the shtar. So if I'm telling you it was written, so then I'm also telling you that I never gave it to you, and therefore the sale never happened. So therefore you cannot use this document. So that's the argument over here. Could this document that was not ever independently verified, could you use it? It was only verified by the seller. So Rav Shem Gamliel says, because it wasn't independently verified, you can't use it, so you're going to have to now prove otherwise with a chazakeh that this is your property. How could you say that this is the understanding of the machlokes? But we have another place where Rebbe and Rav Shem Gamliel are also arguing about a shtar, and there their opinions are exactly reversed. The Tanya, because we learned in the Braisa as follows. Two people, that are grabbing onto the same star. So here we're talking about a borrower and a lender that are grabbing onto one star, and it says in the star that you owe this person $1,000. And what are they arguing about? Malvaim. So the lender that's holding onto this star says, Shaliu, this is my document because you still owe me the money, and pay me all the money in the star. And v'nafal mimeni. And what happened is I lost the document. It fell down, and I found it, but it's mine. You still owe me the money. Umatsasi, I found it. The lender. The lender is claiming that it's his star and the money is still owed to him. Now, but for the borrower is also, they're both grabbing onto the same star. And the Leva says, Shachahu, yes, this star was yours, or others are great to say Shali. This star was yours because I did borrow money from you, but I already paid you. What happens when a person pays a loan? So the lender gives the star back to the borrower. So you shouldn't collect the second time. So the borrower says, I paid, and therefore I had the star, and it fell out of my hands. So what do you do in such a case? So here Rebbe and Rav Shimon Gamliel argue about this. So Rebbe says you verify the document, and that's it. Which sounds like what Rebbe is saying is, as long as the lender could verify that this is an authentic document, authentic signatures, he can now use it to collect the entire loan with this. That's what it seems like Rebbe is saying. Now Rav Shimon Gamliel says, what do we do in such a case? Yachlaiku. They split this. So let's say the shtar had in it a loan which was in the amount of $100, and there's an argument whether he still owes that money, so he's going to have to pay only $50. We split the money that they're arguing about, and the reason is because they're both holding on to it. We always know when two people hold on to one object and each one says, it's all mine, kula shali, what do we do in such a case? Yachloike, we divide it.
So it's the same as the
So the Gemara brings it right now, let's see. So now the Gemara asks on this, now the question that was asked on this Braise is, the question is on Rebbe's opinion. The less Leila Rebbe, does Rebbe not agree to Hadit Nan, to this that every child knows? The first Mishnah, Masechta Bava Metzia, what does it say? Two people holding on to the garment. This one says, I found it. And the other one says, no, I found it. Each one says the whole thing is his. So what's the halacha? This one swears that I don't own less than half of it. The other one swears that I don't own less than half of it. And they split this talis. So why is this case with the document any different? Why wouldn't Rebbe agree that in this case you should split the contents of the document, which is the loan, and you should only pay half? Why does he say that you verify it and you pay fully? Now, what's the answer to this? So the Gemara gives us a new pshat in this price and a new understanding of Rebbe's opinion. So Rav, in the name of Rav Nachman, answered and explained that the pshat in this price here is as follows. If this document that they're both grabbing onto and they're arguing about is already a verified document, the signatures were verified by Bezdin, the kola alma loy pliga de achloiku. No one would disagree that the halacha is that you split, that he only has to pay half. As we just said, everybody agrees to what it says by Shnai Mechs and Batalas that you split it. Ki pligi, so what exactly is the argument here between Rabbi and Rav Shimon Gamliel? B'she'enem akoyim. The document that they're both holding on to and arguing about was never verified. Its signatures were never verified. But the thing is, though, even though it was never verified independently by other Eidim that tell us that these signatures are good, but the borrower himself, which is holding on to the shtar, together with the lender, he is verifying it by the very fact that he says, it's true, I borrowed this money. What's happening over here in this case? The borrower is saying, it's true that I borrowed this money, the shtar is authentic, but, then he adds a but. But then he says, but I paid it back. So he's verifying it, but at the same time, he's telling us that I paid it. So now the question is, since the verification of the document comes from him, is he believed now to come and say that it was paid up? If the verification of the document would not come from him, if the verification of the document would be independently, so then you're not believed to say that this shtar was paid up. That's the rule always regarding a shtar. A shtar that you're not verifying, Eidim are the ones that verify it, so then we know that the shtar is authentic. You can't just come and say that a shtar was paid up. Prove that it was paid up. Right. But if you're the one that's verifying the shtar, so because you had the simple option to just say this whole thing is a forgery, it never happened, and you opened your mouth and said that I'm coming and verifying it, so Pesha Asa, since you're the one that's verifying it, you have the ability now to come and say, but I paid it up. That's what the machlekes over here is. Do we say that because the verification is based on the borrower himself, so therefore he's now believed to say that he paid it up? Or do we say, no. The moment you admit and verify the document, so now this is considered to be a kosher document min ha-Torah, and now you don't have the ability anymore to say that you paid it up. So that's the argument. So Rebbe holds, since the borrower here admits that he wrote the shtar, so even after you admit to this, you're going to have an outside independent verification. Otherwise, he can then come and claim that he paid it up. So therefore what Rebbe is saying over here is, if you're going to independently verify the shtar, then gavi palge, then you'll be able to collect half. So when Rebbe says you should verify, he didn't mean verify and then the lender could collect it all. He meant to say, if you'll verify it, then yachloika, then we'll split. And the lender could collect half. Why only half? Because the borrower is also holding on to it. When two people hold on to something together, the halacha always is you split. But v'iloi, if this document is not going to be independently verified, then chaspe ba'almahu, then this shtar is like a broken piece of earthenware. Then you can't even collect even 1 penny. Why? Because of pesha sahu pesha hitter. Because now the borrower is saying, you're relying on me that this is a kosher shtar. I'm the one that verified it. I'm telling you that I paid it all up. And we accept that. And therefore he won't be able to collect a penny. That's what Rebbe is saying. Rab Shimon Gamliel Savar, however, Rab Shimon Gamliel's opinion is, when it's you that agreed, that admitted, that is, that the borrower in this case admitted that he wrote the shtar, so now it becomes a kosher shtar and ein sarach l'kaimai. You don't need any additional outside verification because the truth is that min ha-Torah, even before he admitted that he wrote the shtar, a shtar min ha-Torah does not rely on him admitting to this. Min ha-Torah it's kosher without you. So if min ha-Torah it's kosher without you, you don't have the power to come and say, oh, I verified it, so I cannot come say and it's paid. No, min ha-Torah, the shtar is kosher without you. And therefore, even without verifying it, v'yachleiku, we will split the contents of the shtar, and he will have to pay half. So what do we see right over here? It's Rav Shimon Gamliel, the one that holds that that once you admit that the shtar was written, you can't come and qualify and come say any other claims about the shtar. In this case, you can't come and say that it was paid up. Before we said that Rav Shimon Gamliel holds the exact opposite. Rav Shimon Gamliel says, since it's the seller that's the one that admitted that he wrote the shtar, so he has the ability to come now and argue, I wrote it, but I never gave it to you. So it's a contradiction of Rav Shimon Gamliel's opinion. So the Gemara answers, Eipach. Very simple answer. So we're going to have to switch the opinions in this brisa that we just quoted, which is a brisa from Bava Basra. We're going to have to switch the opinions in that brisa that it should fit with what we said before. That Rav Shimon Gamliel is the one that says that after he admitted tzarech l'kaima, it needs an independent verification, and he could come and taina that I never gave it or that it was paid up. Or now the Gemara offers yet another pshat for this machlekes, going back to the brisa that we spoke about before, the person that has 2 proofs for his acquisition of this property. He says, I have a shtar, and I also was here for 3 years. Cheskas Gimel Shanim. Now the Gemara goes back to the title of Chazaki being Cheskas Gimel Shanim, that he was there 3 years. So another pshat we can say regarding this brisa is Loilam Loi Tepach. The brisa that we just quoted from Bava Basra, we don't have to switch the opinions because we're going to give a new pshat for the brisa here. Elohacha, rather, over here, what's the machlekes in our brisa? Belevarer kamiflegi. They're arguing about whether a person has to prove that the argument that he said in Bezdin is true or not. So as Rashbam here explains, what this means is when you walk into Bezdin and you offer in your tinus, in your claims in Bezdin, you offer information, you say, I can prove it, that it's mine because of A, B, C, and D. You don't have to say so many tinus. It's not, you can just say, I can prove it because of just one reason. But you come and say, I can prove it because of this and because of this. Now that you said that, the question is, do we force this person to actually prove that everything he's saying is true? Or do we say, since in essence you didn't have to say all these tinus, you could have just simply said, I have one proof that it's mine, so then it's enough that you back up your words just by one proof. You're not going to have to show to us that everything you say is true. So over here, this person walks into Bezdin and says, I bought this property because I have a shtar and I have a chazakeh. He's speaking too much. All he could say is, I have a shtar. What does he have to say both shtar and chazakeh? So according to Rebbe, so he could just say that I have a shtar, and that's it. That's enough. He doesn't need any more. Rab Shimon Gamliel says, no. He's going to have to bring all the proof that he has. He's going to have to bring the shtar and the chazakeh, or maybe No, sorry, it's the other way around. Rav Shimon Gamliel is the one that says because he has a chazaka, because it was there for 3 years, so that's good enough. You can just bring the fact that it was there for 3 years, and he doesn't have to bring a shtar. Because after 3 years, the nature is that a person loses his shtar, and therefore you can rely just on the fact that it was there for 3 years. But Rebbe says, now that you told us that you have a shtar, even though you were there 3 years and you could prove to us that you were there 3 years, you're bringing us Eidim that you were there 3 years, and you don't need a shtar anymore, but once you said you have that shtar, so you're going to have to bring us that shtar. So that's the taich of your levader. Does a person have to bring the proof that he says he has, even though in essence, if he wouldn't have told us that he had the shtar, we wouldn't require him to bring it. But now that you said it, you're going to have to be mevari, you're going to have to prove that your words are true. And the Gemara brings a story that actually happened in connection to this interpretation of the machlekes. Kiha, the Rabbi Yitzchak bar Yosef, like the story of Rabbi Yitzchak bar Yosef, have a massive bezuzi bar Rababa. He was trying to collect a loan from Rababa. So Asla Kamei, the Rabbi Yitzchak Nafche. They came in the entire two Rabbi Yitzchak Nafche. So Omar, what Rababa said is, Peraticha b'fnei pliny. I paid up the loan, and I paid it up in front of 2 witnesses, so and so. So Rabbi Yitzchak says, yeah, is this true? You paid up the loan in front of these 2 people? Yavoya pliny v'yeidu. So bring those Eidim that you paid up the loan. Amalei, so Rabbi Abba said, why do I have to bring the Eidim that I paid up the loan? We're talking over here about a loan that wasn't even documented. This is a loan that Rabbi Yitzchak, Rabbi Yosef, there was no shtar here. It was just collecting the money from him, and he says, I already paid up the loan, but there is no shtar here at all. So Amalei, so therefore, Rabbi Abba says to Rabbi Yitzchak Nafke, if I'm not going to produce those witnesses that I actually paid the loan, I'm not believed to say that I paid it. But don't we know that the halacha is hamalves chavere be'edim? If you lend somebody money, even if it's in the presence of witnesses, but this is not documented, when he pays up the loan, he doesn't have to produce witnesses that he paid it up. If he claims that he paid it up without any witnesses, we're going to trust him. The only time we don't trust a person is if the lender still has a shtar in his hands. But if he doesn't have any shtar and you're claiming you paid, you don't have to bring witnesses that you paid it. So why are you asking me to bring witnesses in this case? So Amalei, so Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha answers him and says, I hold like what you yourself actually said regarding such a kind of case. And the point here that the Gemara is going to explain is that he opened his mouth and said that he has witnesses. He didn't have to say that he paid in front of witnesses. He could have just said, I paid. But he said that I paid in front of witnesses. Once you say that you have the witnesses, now we force you to actually back up your words and to bring those witnesses. A person that says, Praticha bifnei pliny, he says, I paid you, and he adds, and it was in front of these Eidim. He has to bring those witnesses to testify, even though he didn't have to put his foot in his mouth and say, I have witnesses, but once he said that, he has to bring them. Similar to what we're saying here, that Rebbe says that once you say you have a shtar, you have to bring that shtar. Even though if you wouldn't have said it, it wouldn't be necessary. There's an interesting Rashbam here actually that says, and there's a Taisvis and Amud Beis, a big discussion about this. The Rashbam says they're a very interesting thing. You have to bring those witnesses that you said you have, but those witnesses don't even necessarily have to testify to support what you're saying. If those witnesses come and say, we never saw what you said happen, it's still going to be okay, because in essence, you don't need witnesses to really back up your claim. You can just say that I paid without witnesses. You just have to bring those people into Bezdin. Even if they're not backing up your claim, it'll be good enough. That's what the Rashbam here says. Taisus asks in it doesn't make sense. According to Rebbe, you have to bring those witnesses to actually back up your claim. Okay, so Amalei, Rab Abba argues back to Rabbi Yitzchak Nafke, still arguing that I don't have to bring witnesses. Why? Because he said, but v'ha'amarav gidl amarav, halacha kedivrei Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. Rav Gidl said that the halacha is like Rav Shimon ben Gamliel that says that even though the person said he has a shtar, but since it's after 3 years, and he was there, Cheskas Gimel Shanim, he was there 3 years, he doesn't have to bring his shtar. And furthermore, he added, Fa'af Rebbe loy omar ela levada. Even Rebbe himself only said that, why do you have to bring those Eidim or a shtar once you said you have it? Is because once you say you have it, so you have to prove that your words are true. But if you wouldn't have said you have this proof, it wouldn't be necessary for you to bring this. So therefore, what the Gemara is saying is, it's more logical to accept what Rav Shimon ben Gamliel says, because in essence, you don't even need this proof. So just because you said you have it, now you're going to be forced to bring those Eidim. And if not, you're going to lose this property. So therefore, we pass like Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. So Rav Abba is arguing in my case as well, if I can't produce the Eidim, I don't need the Eidim. I can just say I paid up the loan. Amalei, but Rav Yitzchak argued back and said, no, ano nami levarika mina. I actually hold like Rebbe, and Rebbe says that once you say that you have a certain proof, you're going to be forced to bring that proof, and otherwise you're going to lose the property. And therefore, in this case, you said that you have Eidim that you borrowed, that you paid up the loan. Bring those Eidim that you paid up the loan. Okay, I guess we'll stop here today. This Mishnah is already beginning of Kol Hamshech.